So let me set the stage for this before I introduce our fantastic panelists. So I was really enjoying the conversation yesterday where Tiffany was talking about the major trends that they were thinking about changing the economy. And she mentioned energy, geopolitical issues, and also digital transformation, obviously. And then today, we've had a lot of conversation where individuals have talked about, well, what are the big constraints? What are the things that are inhibiting organizations or individuals from being able to extract the full value out of artificial intelligence? And we've heard comments about energy. And I too, was very fascinated by the nuclear power plant example. That's pretty amazing. We've heard a lot of issues around financial capital. There's a sort of risk-taking propensity was one of the questions that just came up. But for me, and I am biased because my expertise is in HR, the talent issue seems to me to be one of either the biggest constraints or one of the biggest enablers. And it was very pleasing to hear that that was a topic that was brought up by the last panel. So I wanted to spend some time thinking about artificial intelligence and the recoding of business, but be thinking of that through the lens of talent management. What does this mean for our people? And so today we have with us two great panelists to help this conversation. We have Mary Beth Eckert, who's the EVP, Chief Information and Digital Officer at Pacific Life. And we have Adam Fingersh, who's the Chief Customer Officer and EVP North American Operations at Experian. So Mary Beth, Adam, I'm going to just ask if you could briefly just give a little bit about your background, what you do in your organizations, and then we're going to jump in. So Mary Beth, we'll start with you.
Absolutely. So yes, thank you, Ian. As you said, Mary Beth Eckert. I'm with Pacific Life, which is a life and annuity organization that's headquartered here in Newport Beach. And I lead the technology for this global organization.
Thank you. Adam?
I'm Adam Fingersh. I work for Experian, based in Costa Mesa here locally. Experian, many of you know for credit reporting, but it's a portion of our business. We have businesses in a number of other industries, including health and automotive and direct-to-consumer and so forth. I've been with the company for 20 years and have led various aspects of the business and currently lead all of our operating functions that has a big role in how we enable our workforce to adopt new tools and the evolution of our workforce over the last several years.
And in your spare time, you teach a few classes for us over the business school, so we're very appreciative of that as well. So let's jump right in. What is reality and what is hype? So this is a question that comes from, there's a wide variety of studies that you can see that talk about the productivity gains associated with artificial intelligence when it comes to workforces. And I'd be curious to just get your perspective on how transformative is this in your observation, in your organizations? Is it something that is truly revolutionizing the way you're doing work today? Is it more incremental? And where do you think that's going? So what are your thoughts on the reality versus the hype?
Well, I'll go first. Okay, so I think as we've heard over the last day and a half, this is a mixture of hype and reality. All of us have read. It was the huge fanfare. Guess what? Large language models, AI, generative AI have been around for what, 70, 75 years now? Gen AI is the new shiny object. So everyone races after that, and all of a sudden you start to read about the trough of despair. You know, we didn't talk about that a lot today, but you know, I think some of us have experienced that in different ways. And now we're hitting the equilibrium of how truly is this technology transformative for the way we think, the way we compute, the way we execute our business, the way we execute our lives, really. I would say it is reality now. We've heard about use cases, and although it is incremental, and we started to talk about it more today, it's about what's the ROI, what is your investment in this, where do you start to point your investments to really start to drive your business? Most of us started with using things like Microsoft Copilot to start to impact productivity. Wasn't a huge win in anybody's book, I don't think, because these companies need to recoup their investment in these products far before these products may be ready for the market. But you start to see how these things lean in and how you're starting to go to market. And now we're starting to do use cases that are much more focused on how do we change our customer service reps experience, how do we change the lives of our engineers, how we do that. And we've heard all those use cases. So I think at a business that is not leaning into this 100% like some of the startups we've talked about today and all that other things. It's much more incremental is the reality, but it is a reality, and we talk about it almost every day. And the journey will continue.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that the generative AI hype cycle that is following the traditional curve, and there was a lot of frothiness at the beginning, about 20% productivity savings in engineering frameworks and some other areas. I will say that we are seeing improvements and we are seeing benefits that are coming from this set of tools. We've been a big data and analytics firm for the entire existence of our company. We have one of the largest data sets of any business on earth. And we've used analytics and machine learning and artificial intelligence for years to help our clients answer tough questions and help consumers manage their financial lives. And generative AI is the next evolution. And it's a pretty significant step forward when you think about the benefits that it does provide. And I think one of our early learnings was how to create an environment where our employees could get on board, where they could gain access to these tools in a safe but growth mindset-oriented way, and how to make those tools widely available to the population. And I think as our employee base has adopted these tools, we've begun to see how specific use cases can actually drive value, and the incremental level of that can be pretty significant in some cases and can be just slightly noticed in others.
Can either of you give any maybe more detailed use cases that you've seen that were either very successful, or we can also share some of the bad news, maybe that were not very successful?
Sure. We have put generative AI into almost every facet of the business. Our CEO is a strong advocate for these tools. And as I said, it's a natural evolution from what we've done around artificial intelligence. And I think one of the big successes that we've seen is we've had every one of our engineers across the enterprise adopt Copilot, 100% adoption across every engineer. And what we have seen is benefits not only in productivity, albeit on a smaller portion of their daily hours than I think the earlier articles assumed that you were going to get 20% on every hour that an engineer spent clocked in. We're seeing that those benefits come more obviously in the coding hours, but also it helps with consistency and reduction of aberrancy and errors and so forth. And so we are on the journey of tooling the organization to see how those tools drive the benefits and how it increases both productivity but also quality through tracking of aberrancy and others. We have rolled out generative AI tools directly to consumers in our online consumer chatbots that help consumers kind of navigate their way through our environment, as well as helping our agents who are on the phone with consumers get to information more quickly and to provide a more consistent answer when they do get to that information. So we've seen great benefits. I think there are some spaces like some of the office tools and others where it's interesting. It's a slick tool, but not so sure that it's yet driving the benefits that we all hope it will at some point. But all evidence is that as those continue to improve, there'll be benefit there as well.
Yeah, and I think we're taking a similar journey. We're moving slower than Experian, to be fair. We've done some great pilots, GitHub Copilot, for example, and how does that impact the productivity of the engineer? What's interesting now is we're on the verge of doing business use cases that really are the internal customer service type reps. How do you take a search for information as you're on the phone and present that data in a way that quickly enables that CSR to answer those questions in the immediacy, or an underwriter, not just giving the data to answer the question, but have the documentation right there and attachable to it. Because in a regulated environment, you have to make sure that you're not making the decision using Gen AI, but you're presenting data that assists in the decision. What's really fascinating to me about this as we go into these types of use cases is you talk and we're engaging an external party and you think, oh, this is going to take months, right? This is the typical 9-month type of thing. Oh no, it's a 6-week, 4 use cases from inception to implementing them in a usable fashion. They'll either succeed or they won't. You fail fast, you really learn from them, you move on, but they are starting to succeed. And I think, when we talked about George yesterday, that's a great example. It probably started very small and you just keep adding on to it and growing, and that incremental approach is really what's exciting about this, right?
This is an interesting week for me in the sense that it's sort of all AI all the time. So on Monday and Tuesday, I was at an event at UCLA. It was a gathering of all the University of California universities to talk about different things that we're doing in artificial intelligence. And they had a whole profile of use cases that are across the system. I mean, we're a huge beast as an organization, so there's all different types of things. And just some of the examples range from obviously sort of chatbot type activities of how we engage with our employees, but also how we engage with our students, some successes there. Interesting one, we have a workforce that's heavily dispersed, so people work remotely. Health and safety concerns around that, basic things like ergonomics. And so a tool that was being used to sort of assess the ergonomics of home work environments, which I thought was pretty interesting because we don't have the ability to basically furnish all of our employees' homes. So how do we actually help them with that activity? Everything from that to how do we deal with all the various chemicals that we have to follow all of our research, and even one that was allowing one of our campuses to do 24-hour-a-day data and analytics on sensitive health-based data, which I thought was pretty transformative. And so we're seeing the breadth just because of the breadth of our activities. The big question becomes scale. And how do we as an organization, but also how your organizations think about scale in this space? And maybe related to that question with the notion around workforce is in this conversation is interesting false sort of trade-offs we kind of make, right? And so there's this notion of, is it transformative, is it incremental? Okay, clearly it's not going to be either or. Another one of those perhaps false comparisons as it thinks about scale is AI a substitute or is it a complement? And this becomes very relevant as we think about employment. That's one of the big things that people become scary. Is it going to have some people lose jobs? Is it going to increase employment opportunities for others? How are you thinking about those issues? You're pretty substantial organizations. How are you thinking about those issues in your organization?
I think one of the interesting things is if you rewind 25 years ago, the same concerns existed when the internet first became a business tool, right? There was jobs were going to disappear and humans weren't going to be needed. And if you fast forward, there's a lot more jobs now than there were then. They're just different jobs. And I think what we're seeing is that these tools are, at the outset, co-pilots. I think that it was discussed in the session 2 sessions ago that they sit alongside the employee to make them more productive, more accurate. There are some use cases where the technology can sit in place of a human being, but I think those are further into the future, especially in our areas where there's so much regulation and need to have human engagement. But I also think a lot of what we talk to our employees about is we operate in a high-performance environment, and we're a public enterprise, and our clients expect innovation, and our consumers deserve new products and capabilities. And this allows us to reinvest underutilized resources in new innovation and in new exciting spaces. So it's not a zero-sum game, it's a redeployment of resources towards new innovation and new exciting places. And our employees who operate in a high performance environment like that, they want to be at the forefront working on some of the newest things. So it's both using these new tools, but also this productivity in and of itself creates capacity for new innovation and new exciting work for them to be doing as well.
Yeah, and I think scale's yet to be seen. I'm sure people in this audience are experiencing scale in different ways, in different fashions. But right now for us, and a lot of what I'm reading is it's more augmenting humans, and it's taking tasks and doing that. How do you start to build the agents that interact with each other? I think these new tools are the way that we're going to achieve the scale and just really starting to build upon each other. I've seen some incredible demos that you just walk away so excited, right? Where one agent can interact with another agent and update the prompt language because the outcome was not what you expected. And it's just a human touch point to validate what the outcomes are versus having to input every step along the way. That's when you get really excited about some of these new technologies and what's the potential of that and what doors does that start to unlock? How do we start to lean into that? But I think that's a lot of the unknown still as we do start to figure out Right now for us, it's very much augmenting humans, that the critical thinking, I think there was a gentleman who just asked about that at the last topic, was, you know, it's not a critical thinking device. It doesn't replace the human today. Harvard Business School did a quote back in, I think it was 2019, that, you know, generative AI isn't going to replace the manager, but the manager who doesn't use generative AI will be replaced. I mean, substitute manager with radiologist, with whatever skill set you want, engineer, whatever you want. I think that's going to be truly the reality as we figure out how does it start to go after, and some of the low-laying jobs, I think that will definitely be replaced, because you don't need engineers who do repetitive tasks, or, you know, people on a food service line who do repetitive tasks. Like, these things, I think, will start to be automated and augmented in a way that totally replaces it. But as you go up, the jobs are going to change. Yeah. Data jobs will become even more critical. Prompt engineering, all these types of skill sets, critical thinking, how do you piece A to B to C to equal Z, is just going to be more and more imperative.
So let me give you another false choice. And just sort of thinking through this, you're saying the jobs are going to change. So as you think about the talent and developing the workforce that allows your organizations to be competitive, is it you buy or you build? Do you go out and hire? So we had some examples. I don't know how many of us have what was it, VJ, 2.5 billion, 2.2 billion to go out and get some particular team of individuals? Or do we look at the people that we have and we think about what those investments should look like? I should give a statement. I have a vested interest in the answer to this question, because I'm in the business of building. Right. So I'm trying to figure out what to build. But what is the perspective that your organizations are taking today around developing that right talent?
You know, I think it's really, Pac Life has been a buy versus build for quite a while. We just don't have the scale to go out and build everything, and we like niche players who can come forth with the things that are not differentiating the market, to be, you know, behind the scenes, doing what's best in breed. I was just reading an article today. NVIDIA, you know, EXL co-authored and presented out. There's a large language model for EXL, which is an insurance company. So it's one of the first insurance company, large LLMs, that is unique to EXL in their business. And one of the quotes in there was fascinating to me. In 2023, 1% of models were unique to the industry or function. By 2027, 50% will be unique. So I think that really starts to align to your thinking of these are going to be built. They're going to take a baseline of commonality, and then you've got to build them to your unique needs for what works for your organization. And it's that combination, I think, that's going to pave the way.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I think we're both, and I'll explain why in just a moment. When Experian is kind of a three-legged stool in the sense of we're a data analytics and software company. And many people may not think of us as a software company just because of our history, but we build software that helps clients manage their risk environments. And they leverage our analytics and our tools on those platforms, and clearly our data goes through those models as well. So there are a number of examples where we are testing a broad spectrum of tools from existing incumbent players and new upstarts who focus just on this specific niche. And then we're building our own LLMs as well, because it's core to our business. We've built analytical models for decades. It's been the core of our business for so long that it's just been the natural evolution. We were already testing artificial intelligence and generative AI in a lot of these spaces decades ago. Generative AI adds a whole different level of capability, and so we're doing some of those things internally, but we're also literally testing across the spectrum of the biggest and the smallest players in the market.
So how do you prepare your leaders to navigate what is, I think, a very different strategy for organizations? What types of things are you doing to prepare your leaders, or what blind spots do you see within your leadership?
You know, it's interesting. When we started on this journey of adopting generative AI into the general workforce, it was clear to our executive team that all of the leaders of the organization had to adopt at as fast, if not faster, a pace as the general population in the employee base. And so we actually track and monitor what generative AI tools our executives and our people leaders are using, and not as a punitive level, but just to ensure that there's a feedback loop and a mechanism to make sure that they're encouraged to be on this journey. Because it is easy for some people to kind of take a step back and say, well, the task-oriented individuals are the ones that are going to get the benefit from this. But to the contrary, you need your entire population of employees, especially your leaders, to understand how these tools can benefit the organization. And so we rolled out these tools to our executive teams in betas and are tracking, monitoring, and encouraging their use. They're in a lot of our dominant goals across the organization for full adoption. And we've seen that benefit the organization more broadly, because higher order use cases that require investment are coming to the fore because the leaders have been deeply engaged rather than watching from the sidelines.
Got it.
I think that's balanced with the reality of this is scary to a lot of people, right? So, we're looking into a data and AI literacy program, figuring out who we can partner with to offer that across our senior leaders of the organization, because you do hear it in their voices. Everyone wants to be on this train. Everyone wants to know what's going on, but the reality is, there's a lot of articles out there that you can read, and you can play with ChatGPT and things, but a lot of people at these senior levels don't know how to get started on that journey. So I think there's just a reality of make sure that you're educating and making people not feel uneducated or stupid as you enter into these conversations, so that they're grasping it and they're starting to lean in versus being afraid of it and just pretending they understand what's going on. Because as technologists, we naturally read a lot, or educators and things like that. But this is a whole new way of thinking, and we talk about it not as a technology at our organization, it's a business tool. Yeah. So we do expect the business to understand how to leverage this type of thinking to transform the way they operate, and that technology is there to support them. That's a big shift from traditional thinking. And how do you prepare people to do that? It's not a snap of a finger and here's a book to read. It's engaging on every level of the organization around how does this think? What are the tools? What are some use cases? How does this look, taste, and feel? So that people can start to understand it on their terms and get more and more educated and excited around it.
And a big part of it is walking the walk. So our most senior executives, and a fun use case was at our global leadership meeting last year. Our global chief operating officer, so doesn't get much more senior than that, maybe one role more senior than that, developed his entire presentation, slides and talk track on GPT tools, or Gen AI tools, and started his presentation in front of the global leadership team explaining that. So he was walking the walk, not just talking about it. My boss, who's our regional CEO, uses it for agenda preparation and topics that get presented to the leadership team. So the most senior folks in our organization are using it in their work in a very visible way.
Yeah, I don't think we can underestimate or understate the importance of the symbolic aspects of this as much as we can talk about the substantive.
Right.
We are still human, and we respond to both substantive and symbolic activity. And the absence of the symbolic means we end up in fear.
Right.
So I think that's actually pretty important. So I'm going to wrap it up on this. Maybe you can share, I talked about hype versus reality. Maybe we'll end with, where do you envision it going? Where are you making bets? Where are you focusing? What's the areas that are most intriguing right now for you?
So we're testing this, as I said earlier, across almost every aspect of the organization. Some of them more front-footed, where there's obviously less risk, or where it's not, there's no regulatory element to contend with. The ones that are more risk involved, we're taking a measured approach and wanting to make sure that we bring the regulator along with us and that we are doing the right thing for consumers and our clients with it. But still doing the tests alongside our regular production to see how they perform and using that as a mechanism to advance our thinking and advance our capabilities. I think that if you fast forward 10 years from now, generative AI will be one of those things where, to the point that you made, is a capability. It's just something that exists in the ecosystem. It isn't something that you have to think to use. It's just omnipresent. It's there the same way that we all have adopted the use of analytics and other tools in our daily work without thinking about it. I think that that will be the case with these generative AI tools into the future. I also think early days there was a little bit of preciousness around generative AI versus AI, like what the difference between AI tools and tools that actually used custom on-the-fly generation. And I think a lot of that is going to eventually meld into artificial intelligence and generative AI being a set of tools that are broadly used across almost any use case you can imagine.
I wish I knew, right? Align with everything Adam says. One of my peers that's here today says very insightfully, this is the worst generative AI will ever be. Where does it go from here? Yeah. You know, I don't think any of us could have predicted, you know, a few years ago that it'd be already to this pace of change. I think many of us said right out of the gate, myself included, out of all the shiny objects, this is the one that's going to stick. This is the one that's going to change globally so much that we're not going to recognize going back. And the pace at which it's changing is just astounding. And you know, you look at jobs. Like, there's been other things that have changed how young people entering the market have had to be educated, think about their jobs. This one's changing at all levels. It's changing how we have to be presenting, how we need to be educating ourselves. So it's the whole ecosystem there. How fast will that go? Hard to say. I think those companies who don't allow their employees to safely experiment, make strides on this, will not keep pace. Those that lean into it will expand, grow. But beyond that, I think the future is unknown. I mean, when you look at the amount of investment going into these organizations, it's in the billions. It's staggering is the right word, right? Yeah, as I was sitting here today, I thought, okay, we talk about energy being really one of the limiting factors, right? And all the compute. I found myself thinking, yeah, but at every revolution and evolution we've had, somehow we've figured out another avenue. So how does energy become not the hindrance or the thing that holds this back? Somebody will figure that out, for example, of how to do this differently to not be so dependent on that. When does that come? Who knows? In the meantime, we're going after nuclear power. Again, who would have predicted that 5 years ago, right? So I think it's going to be a fun journey. Scary for many, and I think all of us, when you think about all the ethics, the cyber risk components of this, everything else, but it's learning into this and accepting it and moving it forward.